Hello everyone, welcome to the next video session. So in the previous session we have seen about the introduction to the module, where we have seen the different topics those we are going to cover up around for XenApp and XenDesktop. In the second video we have seen about understanding the architecture of XenApp and XenDesktop. So where there was a layer called as the hardware layer, which completely talks about the hypervisors, setting up the hypervisors. So here when we talk about the hypervisors, it is not specific that you have to use Citrix Xen servers in the backend. It's just not limited to that. We can go ahead and use any of the hypervisors that we would like to have in the environment. So that can be your VMware ESXi servers, it can be your Linux KVM, it also can be your Microsoft Hyper-V. So here in this video series we are going to study on the module 2, that is hypervisor consideration, and in this video we are going to use the VMware ESXi servers as the backend hypervisors. I'm going to use the VMware workstation. So welcome wizard, I just proceed with next, and I will just attach the CD DVD required for this. So this is our VMware ESXi 6.0 ISO. I have got it over here. So here the CD DVD is attached, and let me name it as ESXi 1, and I will just choose a location where I would exactly like to install this. I'll just put it in the D drive, and so here the minimum hard disk that would be required is 40 GB. And customize this. So 4 GB is the RAM that it would require. Processor is minimum 2-core processor, and you should make sure that the VT is enabled. The virtual technology is enabled. Okay, so here I'm just going to use the private LAN segments. So here we go. So we got two options over here. So we're going to go ahead with the standard installer, and the booting starts. So here before, if we talk up to the version ESX, that was in the previous versions we used to call it as the ESX. So where the ESX was using Linux kernel was used. So that point of time VMware did not have its own kernel. Now if you're since from the time it has become ESXi, from that point of time VMware is using its own proprietary kernel, but again the kernel is based on the Linux. And the file system that the VMware ESXi uses is called as VMFS. Stands for Virtual Machine File System, and the latest version that we have got for VMFS is 5.0. So later on in the further videos we will study in depth about the file system. So let's wait for the installation to get completed. So it wouldn't take much time. So here you see on the welcome wizard, so welcome to ESXi. So you can just go ahead and press enter to continue. The end user license agreement, where to accept you have to go ahead and press F11, and you see here that it is scanning for the available devices over here. So after the scanning of the devices, you see that here it is showing you the local storage. So local storage, which we have attached as the 40 GB hard disk drive. So that is being shown over here, and you see here the star mark that says as contains a VMFS partition. Okay, so as I already told you, the VMFS is a file system. It's a proprietary file system for VMware. So here is a remote storage, shows as none, because as of now we have not attached any SAN storage. No SAN storage have been attached as of now. So I will just go ahead and press enter to continue. The default keyboard, I'll go with US default, and you could select whichever you want. Root user password. So here by default the user is being taken as a root. The reason behind that is, again here, the kernel of ESXi. The kernel of ESXi is purely based on RHEL. That's the reason it is by default picking up as the user root. Here I would go ahead and give the root user password. So this password, this is a password that will be used at the time of managing the ESXi, or you can say the configuration and the management time. This is the password that we will be using ahead. This is gathering the additional information, or gathering the additional system information. So here is where it goes ahead and check about all the available components and the working of the components, or in other terms you can say that the functioning of the components is being checked over here. And I would just go ahead and say F11 to install. Very easy installation, no rocket science in the installation. So once the installation is completed, then after that it will ask you to reboot, and after the reboot we'll get a very beautiful console over here to work with the ESXi server. And the console that we are going to get, over here is your COS. We call it as console operating system. But the console operating system, again, it is a virtual machine that runs in the backend, a default virtual machine. Anyways, about that COS we'll talk in the next video series, where we are going to talk about introduction to ESXi. So here the installation is almost completed, 90% done. Okay, so you can see here the installation is successfully completed and is asking for the reboot. Just go ahead and press enter for the reboot. So here you see it says this running VPXA start. So VPXA is nothing but it is the management agent for ESXi service. Okay, so here it is booted up, it is installed, and the rebooting is done. So this console that you see right in front of you, this console that you see here, this is nothing but your console operating system. And this console operating system is actually a virtual machine that runs in the backend. So this is a default virtual machine that gets created whenever you install an ESXi service. And the thing is that you cannot see this particular virtual machine. This is completely, this virtual machine is a Linux virtual machine that gives you the management console called as the COS. So once the hypervisor is installed, so hypervisor, as I already told you, we are going to use ESXi servers in the backend. So once the hypervisor installation is done, next is we are going to work around with installing the hypervisor management consoles, and then we'll go ahead with configuring the hypervisors. So for the management console, so first thing we are going to use here is going to be your Vcenter server. That's going to be your centralized management server, and then we are going to have a Vsphere client. So before we go ahead and start with the installation, we need to know where exactly the Vcenter server fits into the Vsphere environment. And with that, we also need to know that what are the prerequisites of Vcenter server and what exactly the role Vcenter server is going to play around over here. So let's see you here. So what happens is whenever we talk about the production environments, obviously we are going to have more than one ESXi server. So generally what happens is, let's say I have got two ESXi servers. I'll have one Vcenter server in between, and then I got the Vsphere client. So these are the ESXi service. Here I have the Vcenter server and Vsphere client. So here what happens is that a Vsphere client has got certain limitations to it. So one Vsphere client, or from using one console of the Vsphere client, we can manage only one ESXi server. But here, since we have got more than one ESXi server, so I need to have a Vcenter server available for me. Now, Vcenter server acts as a centralized management server. I repeat, Vcenter server acts as the centralized management server for the Vsphere environment. So now what we will be doing is the ESXi server will get connected to the Vcenter server, and using the Vsphere client we will be accessing the Vcenter server. So if we do not have the Vcenter server, in that case you cannot go ahead and create the clusters, you cannot configure the high availability, your storage DRS, your vMotion, or the migrations cannot be done. Right now, to install the Vcenter server, we have got certain prerequisites. So we need to have 8 GB RAM, 60 GB hard disk drive, 4 core processors, 1 NIC card, and it requires a server operating system. The best recommendation is Server 2008 R2 SP1 is the best recommended server over here. But the machine on which you are going to install the Vcenter server, that machine must be a domain joined machine. These are the certain prerequisites to install the Vcenter server. So more in depth about Vcenter server we will be covering once the installation part is covered. So here if you see the lab environment, so I have got one DC machine, it's the domain controller, and I have one machine named as Vcenter server. So if you see the configuration of this machine, it's got 8 GB of RAM, 4 core processor, 60 GB hard disk drive, and this machine is domain joined machine. So if you would like to verify that whether it is a domain joined or not, So here you see that the name of my machine is new Vcenter, and it is joined to the domain. The name of the domain that I'm using over here is training.local. So now let's go ahead and get started with the installation of a Vcenter server. My machine has gone a bit slower today. Okay, so here I have attached the ISO of Vcenter server. Just go ahead and run this. Now, when we talk about the Vcenter server, so Vcenter server comes in two flavors. So one among them is the Vcenter server for Windows, but the one which we are going to use it over here, and the other one, if we talk about that one, is the appliance. Appliance is nothing but it is a Linux based Vcenter server. So where you're just going to have a ready-made virtual machine which works on the command line interface. So here when we are going to install the Vcenter server, so you can see here Vcenter server for Windows. So here the different types of services will get installed over here. So if I talk about the service, the very first one that's going to get installed is we have something called as SSO, that is the single sign-on service. The first one that we're going to have is SSO, that is single sign-on service. Then you're going to have web server service, then inventory, and then finally comes the Vcenter. So these are the four things that would get installed over here. So here the one that we are installing, is 6.0. Okay. If it was 5.5, then we have two different types of installation that is called as custom installation and the simple installation. Here you would have got the options. If it was 5.5, we'll have simple installation and custom installation. Simple installation is it installs the services one after the other, all the four services that we have spoken about. And if we go ahead with the custom installation, where in the custom installation it would list you all those services which we have spoken about before a while. That's your SSO servers, web server servers, and inventory and the Vcenter server. So SSO is the main prerequisite that has to be installed. After SSO, we have the web client, which is an optional, and then we have got your inventory and then the Vcenter. So let's go ahead and get started. So just need to click once on the install and wait for a while. It takes quite some time to come up. You gotta wait for the installation console to come up. This is preparing to install, and after this we'll get welcome wizard for the Vcenter server installation. It's taking a pretty much long time. So you can see the welcome to Vcenter server 6.0 installer. So welcome wizard, we will just go ahead next. So let's wait for it to collect the files. So here you can see that the welcome wizard is popped up. So here simply I will just go ahead next, accept the license agreement, proceed with next. Now here the deployment types. Talk about the deployment types. We have got two types of deployment over here. One is embedded deployment and the other one is the external deployment. Now we are going to do the embedded deployment if you are planning to have a single Vcenter server in the organization where your platform services as well as the Vcenter servers would get installed on the same machine. If you would like to have more than one Vcenter server, then in that case we go ahead with the external deployment. So in the external deployment, one server we will be having which will be considered as your platform service controller, and then remaining Vcenter servers we would have which will be a part of this. So you can see here in the diagram. Let's go with next. That's the system name, FQDN of your system. Just go next, nothing to do over here. Now, single sign-on server configurations. So here you can use the same Vcenter server for the single sign-on, or if you want you can add this server to the existing single sign-on server. So your Vcenter server acts as an SSO also. So SSO was introduced in Vcenter server 5.5. So here you could see that the default username is going to be administrator. If you would like to use or if you would like to change the default single sign-on domain name, so by default it takes up as vsphere.local. So if you want you can change it or you can proceed with the default. Now if I talk about 5.5, just the previous version of this. So in 5.5 you cannot change the single sign-on domain name. It will be default and that will be vsphere.local, and username definitely you cannot change it. In 6.0 they have given you, or the VMware has given you an opportunity where you can change the default domain name, or that is a single sign-on default domain which is vsphere.local. So I'm just going ahead with the defaults and the password for my single sign-on server. Just proceed next. The service account, which account would you like to use it? So let it be training administrator. Just go ahead with next. The database. So here Vcenter server supports the embedded database, or that is the internal database of Vcenter server, which is called as vPostgre. vPostgre is the default or the embedded database that is available with the Vcenter server. If you would like to use this, you can just go ahead and select the option 1, or if you do not want to use the embedded database, let's say I want to use an external SQL server for the deployment. So definitely in the production environment, when we talk about, they would be using the external database only. So in that case, I would go ahead and select the second option where I need to configure all the DSN numbers, DSN username, DSN password, and then I can use the external database. So just go ahead with the first option and go with next. There are the default port numbers, those will be used over here. So common port numbers for HTTP 80, HTTPS port number 443, and so on you can see over here. Now let me explain you one after the other. Vsphere web client port 9443. Now this is the port number which will come into the picture when you are going to access the Vcenter server on the web URL or on the web portal, or in other terms I can say when you're going to use Vsphere web client for the management of Vcenter server. So in that case this port number will come into the picture. ESXi heartbeat port. 902. So heartbeat is nothing but the kind of hello packets that the ESXi servers will be sending to the vCenter server to inform the existence of the server in the network. Dump collectors 6500. So dump collectors are nothing but collecting all the dump files or all the garbage files, you can say. Your auto deploy management ports, your service token ports, and so on. This is your certificate port. So I'll just go next over here. The default directories was gonna get installed. Let's go next and just click on install. So here the installation is gonna take pretty much long time, probably 40 to 45 minutes. So we'll wait for the installation to get completed. Once the installation is completed, once the installation gets completed, we will talk about accessing the vCenter server. So the installation is completed. So this is the console that will get post installation. Approximately almost has taken around 2 hours. So just go ahead and go with finish. So now the vCenter server is installed. Now to access the vCenter server. To access the vCenter server, we need the Vsphere client. Okay, so in the same ISO, I've got the Vsphere client also. So due to the shortage of resources, I'm going to install Vsphere client on the vCenter server itself. So I'll select the Vsphere client and go ahead with install. So it will take some time to extract the files over here. Just go with OK. So this installation is a very simple installation, just like the normal softwares those we install. So welcome wizard, we'll proceed with next, accept the license agreement, next, and install. So here to install the Vsphere client, you just need to have an operating system. So not specific whether you need a server operating system or the client operating system. Doesn't depend upon that. Any of the operating system you can have, whether it's server OS or the client OS. Anything is feasible over here. Now, why we are installing it on the vCenter server itself is that due to the lack of the resources, because I have just got a 16 GB of RAM onto my system. So because of that, I'm trying to reduce the resource usage over here. Okay, so Vsphere client installation is completed. I will just go ahead and finish. So you can see here, this is how the application comes up. I'll just run the application and the IP address of vCenter server. So you can give FQDN or the IP of vCenter server. The username will be the SSO username, which we have seen at the time of installing the vCenter server, and the password. So just ignore the certificate here. and here we go. So we are connected to the Vcenter server. So by default it gives us the 60 days trial, after which we have to purchase the licenses for this. So this is how we install the Vcenter server, install the Vsphere client, and we can proceed with it. Okay. So thank you so much, guys.